Hi, Stan here again. Welcome to Chapter 11 of the Sussex Coast Road, this time around Bognor Regis. Today we find a pier with a history, a wandering fountain, and bits of the D-Day landing. Come on along for the ride. About 3 miles along the A259 from Littlehampton, just past Worms Wood, at the roundabout, we take the first exit on Felpham Road. The A259 runs on towards Chichester, but we are headed towards Felpham. In about a half a mile, we turn left down Felpham Road and past the 900-year-old Norman church and the old part of the village. Turning left at Vicarage Lane, we come to William Blake's house. He lived here from 1800 to 1803, where he wrote the epic poem Milton. The house is open to the public, and the local society has many events here. Felpham is another of the ancient villages along the coast that go back to pre-Saxon times, supporting a bit of farming and fishing and later smuggling. It is older than Bognor, but now serves as a suburb of the larger town. Prior to 1066, the village was valued at £10. During medieval times, much of the coast was eroded and fields and pastures were lost. Short defenses and groins helped slow the loss of land. Felpham has a typical Sussex beach with pebbles at high tide and sand when low. The village was slow to attract seaside resort development, but in the last 100 years, most of the land around the old village has been filled with houses occupied by retirees and those looking for a quieter, less expensive place than Bognor. Speaking of which, let's follow Felpham Road as it turns into Upper Bognor Road, and we see our first object of note in Bognor. We came this way because we wanted to see just how big the Bognor Butlins holiday camp is. Opened in 1960 by Billy Butlin, it has grown to over 60 acres, with 3 large hotels being added in just the last 15 years. The seaside camp, open all year round, attracts over 385,000 guests annually. Only 3 Butlin camps are left. This is the largest seaside resort on the south of England. Most of the others were closed in the 1980s and 1980s. Because of overseas competition. Love them or hate them, this is a part of the 20th century British vacation culture. The story of Billy Butlin, a World War I Canadian veteran soldier who created British family camp vacations in the 1920s, is a great story and well worth researching. Like many of the other coastal towns, Bognor was purpose-built as a seaside resort in the late 18th century by Richard Hotham. He wanted to call it Hothampton, but it didn't catch on. The town did not grow much until the railway arrived in the 1860s. Hotham is remembered by a very lovely park bearing his name right beside Butlins. The road continues down to the Esplanade, with the Victorian residences on the right and the beach and sea on the left. In 1929, King George V went to Bognor to speed his recovery from lung surgery. It sounds like he was not too impressed with the town, because when he was petitioned to add the suffix Regis to the town's name, his reply was Bognor. They were thus granted the request, so the official name is really Bognor Regis. Like most of the major towns along the coast, a pier was built at Bognor in 1865. When opened, it stretched 1,000 feet into the channel. Over the next 60 years, improvements were added, including a pavilion at the end, a large theater at the shore, and Bognor's first movie theater. Charlie Chaplin and Gracie Fields entertained the crowds in their heydays. Storms did their damage here, with the worst one in 1964 that destroyed the pavilion at the seaward end. About 600 feet of weakened pier collapsed into the sea in 1999. Now the Grade 2 listed building operates as a nightclub and bar. The Edwardian Theatre is still quite a sight to see. The pier had a bit of an interesting history during World War II. As with all of the South Coast piers, parts were removed in the middle to discourage the Germans using it for an invasion. This pier was unique in that the Navy took it over and it was called HMS Barbara. It was used as a training site for anti-aircraft guns and cannons. The theaters were used as lecture halls. The pavilion at the end, where the gunnery training took place, was accessed by a rope bridge. Unfortunately, low-quality steel was used after the war to reconstruct the pier. This added to its later collapse in subsequent storms. Just to the west of the pier, we come to the Steyne. This street has a garden running down the middle and is as peaceful now as it was when it was laid out in the 1820s. The three-story buildings, arranged neatly on both sides of the gardens, offer some of the best accommodations of the times for the seaside visitors. In 1824, the bathhouse was opened in the street and offered the only place in town where you could get a cheap hot bath. In the 1890s, a local chemist noticed that there was no drinking fountain for the large number of children in the area. As the council was more interested in Queen Victoria's 60th anniversary than the needs of the children, he publicly raised £111 himself and had the fountain built at the bottom end of the Steyne, at the promenade. For some unknown reason, it was moved in 1928 to Waterloo Square, opposite the pier. In 1956, it was dismantled and moved to Hotham Park, where it sat unused for 10 years. In 1967, a local developer again raised funds to have it reassembled. So now, if we come to the sea end of the Steyne, we will find the Victorian Children's Fountain at a place where it started. Bognor and neighboring Peckham had an interesting part in the day-to-day operations during World War II. Learning from the mistakes of the Dieppe raid in 1942, the military realized that taking a port town in France would be almost impossible. So they decided to build a portable harbor and float it over to France following the landing. Sections of the floating docks were built near here, and when they were put in the water just offshore, they were sunk so the Germans couldn't see them. As D-Day approached, they were refloated and towed to France. One of the pontoon pieces, known as a beetle, can be seen along the west beach at Bognor, and a larger mulberry part is in the water off Peckham and can be seen at low tide. It has become a diving attraction. Now we have to double back to Chichester, returning to A259, and a few miles further along at the next roundabout, the A259 joins the A27. We are now at the city of Chichester, which is a wonderful place to visit, and not really on the coast. Well, that's it for Chapter 11. Only one more left, and we will have completed our road trip from Camber Sands to Chichester Harbour along the Sussex Coast Road. If you're interested in the book this is based on, check out the link in the description below. Also, take a look at my previous series on the Roman road called Steyne Street. This first-century road ran 58 miles from Chichester to London. Please leave your comments below, especially if they have some information I may have missed. Also, press the like button and share this with your friends. Subscribe if you want to be notified when I publish the next video. Thanks for joining me. Bye for now.